that we're very grateful to her. And on behalf of the whole committee, I'd like to really extend our deep gratitude to you, Erica, for everything you've done. But we hope your retirement doesn't mean that you're going to stop, because we don't want that, okay? So please continue to help us in our endeavors, okay? And now I would like to welcome all of you who are online to our meeting. And to be very honest, I'm very excited to learn about the last 20 years and also how the speakers see that we can move forward and on the endeavors on action on aging, which is necessary in this world today. Thank you and welcome to everybody.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's great to see you all. I'm Greg Shaw, the Director of International and Corporate Relations with the International Federation on Ageing. I'll be moderating the question and answer sessions at the completion of all the presentations today. But it really is timely when I'm thinking that, we are in 20 years of MIPAA. We are now in the 4th review of MIPAA. So in 2021, we will have the national reviews and appraisals taking place. 2022, the regional review process will take place. And then in 2023, we'll have the global review and the outcomes of MIPAA as the 4th review proceeds. It really is probably even more important today when we consider the impact that COVID-19 has had on older people really right across the globe. Everyone is now seeing a second wave of COVID-19, and we here in Toronto are seeing a big uptick in terms of cases and deaths, as is every other country. I will briefly introduce each speaker prior to their session and give a very brief bio for each speaker. And it's really now my pleasure to introduce the first speaker today, which is Dr. Alexander Sidorenko, an expert on national and international policy on ageing, really focused on the Central European, Eastern European and Central Asian countries. And for more than 20 years, he served as the head of the United Nations Program on Aging in Vienna, New York, and he's coordinated substantive preparation on the Second World Assembly on Aging, including the drafting of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. So it is my pleasure to call on Alexander Sidorenko. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the introduction, and through you to International Federation on Aging for organizing this event. I would like also to once again mention the name of Jackie and Erica, who were behind all the planning and preparations of this event. And of course, I shouldn't forget about Andra, our wonderful caretaker for all the participants of this meeting. Thank you for all your support, Andra. The theme of my presentation is currently on the screen, I believe, from Vienna to Madrid, the role of the United Nations Program on Aging. I'm going to talk about the international events on aging between the two major milestones of the United Nations activities on aging and international activities. The first and the second World Assemblies on Aging. The assembly in Vienna, the first one, and the second one in Madrid. Andra, I think I need your help. The slides are not moving. Right, okay, it's fine now. So on the move from Vienna headquarters to Madrid, World Assembly, Second World Assembly on Aging, the United Nations Program on Aging was also moving in space. As in 1983, the staff was relocated to the major headquarters of the United Nations in the New York City. So it would be wise, of course, to add the name of this great city to the title of my presentation, which I didn't do in good time, but it's not too late, I believe. So it's from Vienna to Madrid via New York City. But let's come back to Vienna. It's a little bit slow. I have to come back. Let's come back to Vienna to the First World Assembly on Aging, which took place in 1982. But between Vienna and New York, Vienna and Madrid, Vienna's headquarters hosted also quite a few other events, and it's been associated with at least two major international events on aging. In 1990, the United Nations General Assembly established 1st October as the International Day of Older Persons, and 1 year later, in 1991, adopted the United Nations Principles for Older Persons, which remain the only one non-legally binding international document on the rights of older persons. The decision to organize the First World Assembly on Aging was taken by the United Nations in 1978. Curiously, the title was completely different. It was the Assembly on the Elderly. 2 years later, however, at the 35th session of the General Assembly, it was decided to change the name to the current World Assembly on Aging, and I quote the resolution of the General Assembly: in view of the interrelatedness of the issues of aging individuals and the aging of populations. 1 year later, it was decided that the World Assembly will be taking place in Vienna, Austria, from 26 July to 6 August 1982. 11 days altogether, plus 2 days of pre-Congress consultations. One can notice that the Second World Assembly was much shorter, 5 days, well, plus 2 days of pre-Congress consultation, but still much longer was the first one, which perhaps means that in 1980s, the United Nations had much more time to address the issues of population and individual aging. The major outcome of the First World Assembly on Aging was adoption of the Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging. Andra, I think I again need your help. It does not move further. Right, great. The Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging put forward a series of recommendations, 62 altogether, in 7 areas of concern to aging individuals. And these areas of concern to aging individuals are on the screen. I'm still struggling with the slides.
Next slide.
It's after the adoption of the Vienna Plan of Action on Aging, its implementation started, and these review and appraisal exercises were conducted every 4 years, starting with 1985, and the last one was in 1997. The United Nations Program on Aging was conducted all these review and appraisal exercises, preparing the reports of the Secretary General, and the major message which was coming from those reports that the progress in implementation of the Vienna Plan was quite significant. Yet every report in every of the 4 review and appraisal acknowledged also limited progress in improving the living conditions of older persons, or little progress implementation, a daunting task to implement the recommendations, and minimal response to the recommendations of the Vienna Plan, referring most often to these limitations in the developing countries. And of course, the relevant question was, what prevented governments from progressing in the implementation of the Vienna Plan of Action on Aging? The United Nations Program on Aging found that through the review, which was conducted shortly before, the next slide, please, Andrea, which was conducted shortly before the Second World Assembly on Aging. And here on this slide, you can see the major obstacles as those were identified by member states in the year 2001. Lack of funds, low priority of aging, shortage of staff, and lack of knowledge. In spite of all these limitations, in spite of all these obstacles, next slide, The member states acknowledged also that the Vienna Plan of Action on Aging was helpful. 72% of the respondents said that, while 18% felt that it should be amended, it should be changed. 10%, well, I should say, didn't care. Through the debates which were conducted at the General Assembly and Commission for Social Development, the major message emerged that what needs to be added in the amendment of the Vienna Plan is more attention for developmental aspects of aging, which also meant that more attention should be given to the needs and expectations of all the persons in the developing countries, and to the relationships between development of those countries and population aging. Next slide, please. The initial exploration of new directions of the international policy actions on aging was undertaken during the International Year of Older Persons 1999. Next slide, Andrea. During that, during preparations to the International Year of Older Persons, well, that's not what I meant, but it looks nice. For the first time, the general concept of the International Year of Older Persons was formulated as a society for all ages. And later on, as we are all aware, that concept, this motto, was also incorporated in the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. 4 dimensions of the society for all ages were identified in 1995 in the conceptual framework for the International Year. The very well known, the familiar situation of older persons, lifelong individual development, interrelationships of aging and development, and multi-generational relationships. Practically, these dimensions modified, reformulated, found its way in the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. Next slide, please, Sandra. The decision to related to the organizing the Madrid Assembly was taken relatively short before the Madrid Assembly itself. On the top of this slide, the quotation from the resolution of the General Assembly number 53, 1999. At that time, the General Assembly of the United Nations decided that the plan of action, the Vienna Plan of Action, needs some revision, and simultaneously elaboration of a long-term strategy on aging based on the experience of the International Year of Older Persons. I would like to point out that no considerations of the new plan of action on aging was given at that time. 1 year later, it was decided that all these exercises, elaboration of long-term strategy and the revision of the existing Vienna Plan of Action on Aging should be undertaken at the World Assembly on Aging, and it was decided that this assembly will be held in Vienna, Austria, in April 2002. But once again, no mentioning of the new plan of action on aging. But these 2 exercises, the revision of the Vienna Plan and the elaboration of the long-term strategy, the new long-term strategy on aging, merged in the process of preparations of the Second World Assembly on Aging. Next slide, please. And finally, at the assembly in Madrid, we arrived at our current major policy framework on aging, the political declaration, and the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. Next slide, please, Sandra. And with this slide, with the next slide, which will be now on the screen, I arrived to the end of my presentation, and to the end of the journey, which was announced in its title, from Vienna to Madrid via New York. But I'm confident, and on the road of international aging, we will be facing much more destinations, geographical, but most importantly, political and policy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sasha, and it really is nice to see that historical perspective, and it's really, you know, we still talk about the principles of older people, and I know the IFA was actively involved in the development of those principles back in 1991. So thank you for that background information. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Erika Winkler, and I'm very sad to see that she will be retiring next year and she will be sadly missed. But Dr. Winkler was a former Deputy Director of the Unit for Ageing, Population and Volunteering Policies in the Federal Ministry of Labour, Social Affairs and Consumer Protection. In charge of international ageing and volunteering policies, and formerly the chair of the UNECE working group on ageing. She really has, over the years of her life dedicated towards ageing, really represented the European region really well. And I know the IFA has had some very fond experiences and memories working with Dr. Winkler over the years. So Dr. Winkler, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Greg. And it was always our tradition to have a very intensive cooperation with non-governmental organizations. And I would like to thank the International Federation on Aging and especially Jane Barrett for inviting my proposal for one of your webinars. And I thought, in preparation of the 20th anniversary of MIPAA and REACE adoption, achievements and shortcomings in the implementation will be analyzed in the upcoming fourth review and appraisal of its implementation 2018 to 2022. And that is why I thought this event today should also and above be dedicated to commemorate the efforts involved in establishing and strengthening these institutionalized structures within the United Nations and especially within the UNECE and its Standing Working Group on Aging, which we could reach in cooperation with the non-governmental organizations during the last 20 years. And I also thought this would be very important as there is another generation break on the way at the UNECE and under its national focal points on aging. During the last years, many long-standing representatives left the working group on aging and a new team is growing. And I see a great engagement with all its members of the Bureau and of the working group, and especially of the colleagues from Italy who invited the 5th Ministerial Conference on Aging to be hosted in Rome in 2022. But as everybody told already, next year in spring, I myself will start to enjoy the late freedom of the working life, as it is called. And that is why this webinar is also the last opportunity to involve even the founder generation. And it was my personal matter to invite the initiator of this institutionalized follow-up, my former chief of the Competence Center for Aging, Population and Volunteering Policies, Eveline Hönigsberger. She has now 78 years and was very honored to give us a short report about her initiatives at the starting point after the Madrid and the Berlin conference in 2002. I worked with her for a very long time, especially in international aging policies, and she was one of the main actors to the foundation of our work today. Unfortunately, she is not able to take part in person today, but she sent us a video and I would like to ask Greg to start it now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as initiator of the Memorandum of Understanding for the follow-up to the UNECE Regional Implementation Strategy of the Madrid International Action Plan on Aging, and as founder of the Task Force Monitoring REACE, I am particularly pleased to address you today by means of a video message. The international aging policy began with the first World Conference on Aging in Vienna in 1982 and the adoption of the Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging. Despite of important UN activities like the proclamation of the International Year of Older Persons in 1999 under the motto "Towards Society for All Ages," it was criticized that the ambitious goals of the Vienna Action Plan on Aging were not achieved. The demand for a new forward-looking action plan on aging, supplemented by an effective implementation strategy, became evident and was taken up by the UN Commission of Social Development. It followed a preparatory phase, ending up in processing the draft for MIPAA in an open-ended working group at the UN headquarters in New York, in which I had the honor to represent Austria. These efforts culminated in the holding of the Second World Assembly on Aging in Madrid in 2002 and in parallel at the World NGO Forum. The enthusiasm of all those involved couldn't have been greater than after the Action Plan on Aging and the political declaration had been adopted by the governments represented in Madrid. In September 2002, a further highlight followed, the UNECE Ministerial Conference in Berlin, where the regional strategy for the implementation of the MIPAA was adopted by 50 governments participating in the event. 10 commitments were defined, which the governments of UNECE member states were supposed to implement. Concrete information about the procedure and schedule of the follow-up were missing, and further it was stated that the implementation of the UNECE strategy must be financed from the existing UNECE funds. For all those who had given their heart and soul in the preparation of REES, this caused a bitter disappointment. The gaze turned back to Germany, which had significantly supported the development of REES and had carried out the Berlin Conference. From there, however, came a clear no concerning further financial support. Facing this dilemma, Miroslav Makura, the head of the population unit in the UNECE Secretariat, as well as his co-worker Nikolai Botev and myself, came up with the idea of creating an informal, unbureaucratic structure which would enable continuing dialogue, ensuring networking, as well as the exchange of information. I actually managed to gain interest and support from the Federal Minister for Social Affairs and Generations of Austria. As a result, the conditions for a cooperation with the UNECE Secretariat, the Republic of Austria and the European Centre of Social Welfare and Research in Vienna were set out in a Memorandum of Understanding. The European Centre was given the task of developing indicators to monitor the implementation of REES on the various levels of action, further developing a website with information on activities, and drawing up an annual implementation report for submission to the committee meetings in Geneva. The invitation of the minister extended to outstanding experts to participate in a task force monitoring REES was accepted enthusiastically. The first task force meeting was held in Madrid in April 2004 on the invitation of Austria with the support of Spain. I would like to take this opportunity to remind you of the generous support given by the government of Spain and IMSERSO, the Institute for the Elderly and Social Services in Madrid, to the whole process. My gratitude goes also to Aurelio Fernandez, the Commissioner of the Second World Assembly on Aging. Thanks to him, I was appointed Vice President of the World Assembly in Madrid and offered to moderate the exciting roundtable on older persons as agents for change and development, participation and rights. Finally, I would like to thank my former colleague Erika Winkler, who after I had left the ministry worked with great persistence on the upgrade of the task force monitoring REES, and succeeded to transform the task force into a UNECE working group on aging in 2008 with annual meetings, receiving a permanent mandate in 2019. Please remain committed and optimistic during these difficult times when solidarity between generations is more needed than ever. Good luck for the 2022 Ministerial Conference in Rome, yours Evelyn Hönigsberger.
Thank you, Evelyn. I think there is nothing to add, except I learned a lot from her. And we meanwhile had a second World Assembly, a second UNECE Ministerial Conference on Aging in Vienna in 2012, introducing the principles of active aging, and the fourth Ministerial Conference in Lisbon 2017, stressing the potential and contributions of older persons. And I was very proud to serve as a chair of the working group between 2010 and 2017. And following Evelyn, I also had an ambitious goal. After 7 years of chairwomanship, to reach an upgrade of the working group on aging, as it has proven its added value and meanwhile was acknowledged even by the Russian Federation as an important matter in social and economic affairs of UNECE during the first 10 years of its existence. Our consultation group, negotiating with the executive committee, could not reach an upgrade to the status of a committee due to the advanced reform process of the UNECE, but we could reach an equal footing. Now, the Standing Working Group on Aging, adopted by ECOSOC in July of this year, has a multi-year program of work based on the MIPAA and RIS review, and which means a granted, continuing, and we hope sustainable mandate, as it is also connected to the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as at the WHO Decade on Healthy Aging 2020 to 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I thank you very much for your participation. The 13th meeting of the Standing Working Group next week will be my last one, and it is nothing left than to say goodbye to you all. I wish you great success in everything and ensuring the sustainability of the governmental and non-governmental work on aging. As we all know that lobbying and mainstreaming aging and the rights of older persons will be needed more in the years to come towards a society for all ages. And new cooperations will be needed with the open-ending working group on the rights of older persons, with WHO, with the other world regions, and thank you very much. Now it's up to you. Thank you.
Erika, what can we say other than
it was an exciting time? I thank you so much.
Yeah, you'll never be forgotten, and you're not very far from our hearts. And just know that you've been much loved right across the world for the work and the commitment that you've shown to older people in this globe, across this globe. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we do wish you well in retirement, and we never want to say goodbye to someone, so please keep in contact. You're much loved by all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dirk Jarret. And Dirk is well known to many of us here today. A former background in law and sociology, the former head of the International Department of German Association for Public and Private Welfare. He's got many accolades and titles, former European and Global President of the International Council for Social Welfare. Presently the President of the European Federation of Older Persons. So he comes to us with a wealth of experience and knowledge in the field of aging, and we want to learn from those experiences, and particularly around the roles that NGOs play in the future. So Dirk, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for the introduction. Very kind of you. And thanks to all for having invited me. And giving me the opportunity to share with you some experiences and conclusions from, I should say, 2 times 20 years, because my first engagement started in 1980 with the preparation of the First World Assembly on Aging in Vienna. I was responsible for the pre-conference, the European pre-conference for that assembly, and Sasha certainly remembers these times where we struggled together to come to good conclusions and input. Later, I have been the civil society advisor to the German government when it came to the negotiations about Madrid, etc. And it was my pleasure to organize all the previous civil society conferences in connection with the ministerial conferences in Berlin in 2002, in Leon in 2007, in Vienna in 2012, and in Lisbon 2017. And I've been for many years, more than 10 years, the representative of civil society in the UNECE working group on aging. So I'm really, you can consider me as an oldie, perhaps not yet too old, to share with you a couple of reflections which I have in my mind in respect to the issue. My first statement will be that I consider the implementation of MIPAA, especially through RIS in general, and compared with other processes of the UN, as a very positive experience. There's really much of achievement, and this is mainly a merit of the UNECE Working Group on Aging as a very important instrument for the implementation of MIPAA. The civil society organizations were always very much accepted by that working group in the debates, and even we were represented in the Bureau, which is not very much according to the rules of the UN, but quite an exception, a very nice exception, which should go on as long as it is possible. One of the main features which we had in the past is that parallel and as an integral part of the ministerial conferences which we had in the past every 5 years, the civil society conferences had a very high standing. The second set of remarks is a little bit more skeptical, and looking back to the experiences, it is also critical. But the first thing I would like to say to you and share with you is that according to my opinion and my understanding, the implementation of MIPAA is still much too much in governmental hands. I'm of the opinion that that must be mended, because the concerns which are dealt with in the work of the implementation of MIPAA, they touch on the needs, on the aspiration, fundamental needs, aspirations, the living situations and the preoccupations of people. And that means of all of us. The NGOs were accepted, perhaps heard in the negotiations and later in the process of implementation, but they have never been a full-fledged partner in the decision-making processes. They were partners, but not really natural partners, which had at the same level as the governments. You may question that, but that is my opinion. One of the great lacks in the process of the implementation of MIPAA lies in the area of monitoring and evaluation. It should not only be done by the governments, but it should be very strongly supported and performed by civil society organizations. That was strongly requested during the negotiations in Berlin about the regional implementation strategy, but finally the NGOs did not get the role they had hoped for in that indispensable process of monitoring and evaluation. They had, during all the time since Berlin, certainly some of them had the opportunity to give input to the reports of the governments on that implementation process and on the progress achieved. But it was not for all the member states and not on a systematic process of common judgments and negotiations on how to value the output. The working group on aging, I must unfortunately state that their meetings and their agendas seem to be not sufficiently attractive to civil society organizations, because these organizations rarely are ready to invest time and money to attend these meetings. Only a small number of organizations, of civil society organizations, participate regularly, and they're not, mostly of them are from senior civil society organizations, but other important areas are not represented. For example, youth, women, patients, consumers, etc. That means one should reconsider how attractive these meetings are and how much one needs input from the other groups. The influence of the NGOs in the debates is certainly visible, but the effects are to be judged as relatively marginal. So I would like to come to the next set of observations, and that is about what should be the future. Great attention needs to be given to new possibilities and methods for a closer cooperation with civil society. And I would like to share with you just 4 questions, or rather proposals, as food for thought for those who have responsibilities right now, from right now on and in the future. Certainly other actors have also very good ideas, but let me share with you these 4 questions and ideas. The first one is about the change of role. The question is it possible to entrust the conceptual preparation, the agenda and the leadership of specific segments of the meetings of the UNECE Working Group on Aging into the hands of competent and committed NGOs in their own responsible designing, so that societal needs, tensions, and possible approaches for solutions seen from a specifically civil society angle can be presented and debated with the representatives of the governments of the member states. Secondly, isn't there a strong need, apart from verbal statements of intent, for formal regulations on how to engage the organizations of the people concerned, the elderly and others, youth and all of them, systematically in conceptual processes and decision-making procedures, as this is common practice or even required by law in other fields of policymaking, for example, in urban and regional planning, in cases of public interference into property rights or alike areas. After all, social policy can touch massively upon fundamental rights and needs of people, that means all of us. Thirdly, how can the degree of awareness of concerned political decision makers and responsible administrators at all political levels be raised and sharpened in a way that it becomes quite natural that the finally concerned people are considered as the most important partners and actors who have to be given a really decisive role in the effective implementation of the agreed strategies and in the assessment of their results. Would that not only be required by the principles of modern democracy, but also by value-based and economic considerations? And fourthly, that is my last part one, wouldn't it be a reasonable idea to create a program by which delegations composed of experienced politicians, administrators, civil society representatives, and scientists, researchers could study in place the policies, strategies, and practice of other UNECE member states in order to experience good solutions in reality, to learn about new ways and means useful for their own acting, and to promote an intense exchange through practice-oriented cooperation? Dear friends, the investment and the returns could stand in a very positive relationship. Finally, and very importantly, and that is very close to my heart and my experience, the civil society fora should be kept as an integral part of the ministerial conferences which are held every 5 years. This was a very precious element in the past and a great achievement. The declarations of the results, the demands and the recommendations of these civil society fora need to be integrated in the last part of the ministerial conferences and taken very seriously into consideration. I would like to thank at this point in time all my colleagues and friends with whom I have worked for 2 times 20 years in the past on aging matters. Thank you very much indeed. It was a great pleasure. Thanks.
Dirk, your passion and commitment always comes through, and we can hear it in your voice. And certainly the 4 questions that you raise, I think, are important ones for all of us to think about. And certainly the role and the engagement of NGOs at ministerial meetings is really important. I know I've even participated in some of those in the past, but it really is, how do we step up and be a much stronger collective voice for the rights and needs of older people in this world? So I look forward to some questions from the floor to you at the end of the presentations. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce you to Frances Zanoedin. So Frances is also formerly an Australian, although she left Australia in 1970 and working at the United Nations, and was formerly the Deputy Budget Director of the UN Program Planning and Budgets Division. More importantly, Frances is one of the representatives of the International Federation on Ageing in New York and represents the IFA and the committees in which she sits very well. She has a great active involvement in issues concerning the rights of older people, particularly in the context of the efforts being made by the Open-Ended Working Group on Ageing at the United Nations. And I'm very keen to hear what Frances has to say, what else for older people. So thank you, Frances, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you very much to all the organizers of this very, very important meeting. And I want to take a moment to thank Erica in particular for all the work that she has done in the past. And I would like to urge her and welcome her into the NGO community and continue advocating for older persons. I want to say at the outset that I'm speaking as an advocate for the rights of older persons, and I will appear frustrated, critical, and impatient with the slow pace of change. I also want to say up front that I am one of the lucky ones. I have a pension, I have good health, I have a place to live, and enough food to eat. Let us remember that we are all 18 years older since the adoption of MIPAA and 10 years older since the first meeting of the open-ended working group. MIPAA provides all the ingredients for robust programs and activities to improve the lives of older persons. Regrettably, it is as relevant today as it was back in 2002. I say regrettably because MIPAA is almost 20 years old and we are still urging action on the same issues for advancing its implementation, as presented in the modalities document for the 4th review and appraisal. Long-term care, future of work, older persons in emergency situations, older women, social protection systems, lifelong learning opportunities, access to information and communications technology, health policies, NCDs, inclusion of civil society. Are they really emerging issues or are they ongoing, neglected, underfinanced issues still requiring attention? Has MIPAA been able to ensure social protection flaws? Has elder abuse been obliterated? Are older persons receiving adequate palliative care? Have the conditions of informal care workers improved? How much legislation has been passed to protect the rights of older persons? Have benchmarks been established to provide evidence of a change that has taken place? UNECE publications on aging, and thank you, Vitalia, and your staff, show that ECE members have made strides in improving the lives of older persons, but much remains to be done. One policy brief recently published by ECE drew attention to gender gaps in employment, care, pay, earnings, and pensions that illustrate the accumulation of disadvantages for women over the life course. The intersectionality of inequalities must be addressed. The continuing neglect of the dignity of life and of death and the inadequacy of services for older persons are unacceptable after all these years of commitment by governments. Governments must take a life course approach when formulating policies and programs. MIPAA was the instrument that aimed to rebalance the unevenness, the inequalities, the discrepancies in economic and social policies. Are we to surmise that until and unless older persons are officially viewed by governments as valuable contributors to their families, their communities, to society and to the economy, they will continue to be considered not worth the cost of upkeep? From the point of view of NGOs in our advocacy work for older persons in many other venues, MIPAA is a resource for recommendations on policymaking and action programs. MIPAA must be linked to other key international instruments, and I shall refer to a few. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The stakeholder group on aging, comprising NGO committee members from around the world, was established during the negotiations on the SDGs, and we fought to have inclusion of references such as all ages, for all, lifelong, scattered throughout the text. We managed to get 3 specific references to older persons, one in SDG 2 to end hunger, when it refers to malnutrition, and 2 references in SDG 11 on urbanization concerning transport and accessible green and public spaces. Each year since the adoption of the SDGs in 2015, the stakeholder group on aging submits a position paper to the high-level political forum. We have representatives who speak on panels, and we prepare statements to ensure that older persons remain visible and included in implementation of the SDGs. The SDGs have provided us with the opportunity to stress the inclusion of older persons in efforts to leave no one behind, and to link the goals and targets with implementation of MIPAA. Other intergovernmental bodies. MIPAA is also a resource for us to advocate for older persons at other intergovernmental bodies, the ECOSOC functional commissions, Commission for Social Development, CSW, and the Beijing Platform Program of Action, Population and Development Commission, Statistics, the World Health Assembly, Human Rights Council, ILO, Executive Council, regional commissions, as well as other intergovernmental deliberations, such as Financing for Development or the Sendai Framework. At the global level, we have NGO committees on aging in Geneva, Geneva, New York, and Vienna, monitoring and participating in intergovernmental deliberations and actions, including providing necessary language in key documents. We also convene and attend events to highlight the continuing injustices suffered by older persons and to plead for attention to be given to their inclusion. A word about civic space. MIPAA calls for stronger partnerships with civil society all over the world. But all over the world, we have witnessed this shrinking civic space. Governments have constantly stressed that they cannot do it alone. And yet, the official inclusion of civil society in planning and decision-making processes is rare. Governments must recognize that we are not only watchdogs, we are also implementers and partners. A word about the open-ended working group on aging. The many issues raised in MIPAA have been addressed by the open-ended working group, which has become a place for gerontological discussion and enlightenment. It has yet to deliver on its mandate. We can be sure that no member state is against human rights of older persons, but there is resistance to having an international legal instrument that would codify their specific rights wherever they live and under whatever economic and social circumstances. An instrument that would establish legal standards and hold governments accountable. How many more gaps in current human rights treaties need to be found to convince member states that a convention to protect the rights of older persons is necessary? How much more data do we have to collect before action is considered possible? Data will continue to be collected, expanded, refined, and improved. But we already have enough collected to know that older persons remain invisible, excluded, treated like second-class citizens, neglected, abused, ostracized, and abandoned. After the adoption and ratification of the CRPD, persons with disabilities were looked at in an entirely different way. There was a new understanding of what disability means, an issue of human rights rather than being merely an issue of medical rehabilitation and social welfare. Older persons also need a convention to change the way they are looked at. There needs to be a better acknowledgement and understanding of what living longer means. Older persons must be seen as rights holders. Ageism has become so pernicious that the WHO has established an international campaign to combat it. What does that say about the current attitudes towards older persons? If children are treated in the same way as some older persons are treated, there would be a huge outcry. The only conclusion one can draw is that older persons are considered of less value and are therefore disposable. Past their prime, a drain on society, of no economic value, and unnecessary expense. Are we moving forward? I would say yes, but at a snail's pace. At the slow pace we are moving, by the time the youth of today reach 65 years of age, they will have to continue our current fight for a dignified life. We do not want cosmetic treatment. We need major surgery. And major surgery means having a convention that would drastically remove the cancers of existing inequalities, remove existing violations of human rights, remove existing deficits in legislation, policies, and programs, remove existing ageism and elder abuse, remove existing acceptance of the disposability of older persons. They should all be removed immediately. That is how we will move forward. The COVID-19 pandemic is not making it easier to move things forward. But as my friend and colleague, Margaret Gillis of ILC Canada said, COVID-19 is a gift wrapped in a nightmare. Let us unwrap that gift and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frances. And we can always hear the passion and the commitment that you have when you're talking about trying to improve the lives of older people, particularly when it comes to rights. It's interesting when, for some of us probably in this room today, we were around when the discussions were taking place around the rights of people with disabilities and the length and time that it took for that convention to take place. If we were to have a convention in 2021 for older people, it would be twice as quick as a convention for the people with disabilities. So we also have got to remember that why do governments oppose things like conventions? They always think there's going to be a cost burden. And I think there hasn't been enough analysis of what the cost burden to government has been as a result of things like the Convention for People with Disabilities. So thank you for those passionate words, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the audience in terms of comments after the presentations. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Vitalia Gate, who is the responsible of the UNECE work in the area of population ageing and intergenerational relations. She coordinates activities at the UNECE Standing Working Group on Ageing and oversees an organisation of the review of national policies and strategies in implementing MIPAA in the UNECE. So, Vitalia, it's my pleasure to give the floor to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for giving the floor. And it's not easy now to come back to the intergovernmental work and all boring working group meetings, as Dirk said, not of big interest to the NGOs. But I think the sustainability of the intergovernmental work on aging is extremely important. And it is really a proof that since the working group on aging started its activities in 2008, it really helped countries to organize themselves. But it's a pivotal matter. One thing that governments change very frequently with their electoral cycles. We know how they move from much more social oriented to less social oriented. There is a lot of the change during and these are 56 governments that are participating in this group work. But the group manages to carry on and see that these changes are not impacting completely and not changing everything in the world. Also, this is that interest evolves, and it was very clearly how it evolved in our case. If we have just a motto for the Society for All Ages, then we went for the active aging concept, then we went to the more important concept, as we said, realizing the potential of living longer. And this is now is carrying on because it is an extremely important. And if you think that the intergovernmental work orients itself on the realizing the potential of living longer. So this is longevity, the element that is very important, and taking potential and opportunities and strengthening these opportunities for people in old age, but in taking all this community into the intergovernmental work is also extremely important. And another thing, don't forget, this is a working group. This is a voluntary participation. It's not a group that follows on the convention implementation, etc. And this voluntary aspect and participation on member states in the work is also extremely pivotal for us. Just one graph. I hope I will manage to move my graph to show. I borrowed it from the Secretary General's report on modalities for the fourth review and appraisal of the MIPAA. Thank you, Amal. These are 5 regional commissions, and these are reporting by countries for the review and appraisal process. And the marks that I put the little to distinguish is the UNECE region. And you can see that in the first cycle, we had 36 countries that submitted reports. For the second review and appraisal, when we had already a working group working stronger behind it, we've got 40. And for the third one, for Lisbon, we've got 46. And even 47 came in the day before Lisbon Ministerial Conference, because countries wanted to make a point that they look into implementation, that they try to gauge what happened over the 5 years and how they proceed. True, there are some issues with ensuring the bottom-up participation. In some cases, countries do many steps to do it, and we know Italy, we know also Austria, also in Spain. There are a lot of efforts to involve civil society in preparing these national reports. They are also going through the approval process there. They are not submitted to us before, like from Italy, we couldn't receive it in time because it was not yet approved by civil society. So there is a process, and there are countries that are very active, others are not as, but they're learning. Step by step, they're learning how to do it, and they're trying to involve. And this civil society participation is the point that supports sustainability of intergovernmental work. Very important to have it. Now back to the history that we heard, a long journey from Sasha. We heard also from Evelyn the history of the task forces, of the open-ended working group in New York before Madrid. We had the expert group on aging in the UNECE. These things were ad hoc. They were for a couple of years active, and then they kind of closed, and that was ad hoc efforts by the member states to organize themselves. And the real work, it started with the working group on aging in our region. I'm not talking about other regions. In our region, with the establishment of the working group on aging in 2008. It was after the Leon Ministerial Conference. It was when the countries realized that it would be good to have some intergovernmental body that would help them to go through the process, and not only to have ministerial conferences every 5 years, but also work continuously and unearth emerging but also outstanding issues or more aggravated situations, as Francis was mentioning. Most of the issues are not new completely. They are practically or aggravated or evolved into certain different matter. And I started working with this group in 2010 as well, when Erika was elected as a chair, and we started the journey with Erika throughout until 2017, and then I followed. And I really hope, Erika, that you will be an emeritus partner in our working group and you will participate. I am afraid that we will have quite a number of events now online, so that will not also prohibit people to participate more widely in the group. So now we are standing working group. it was a battle. It was a battle to get into this long-term mandate, but it was a battle won, and it's a battle that was worthwhile doing it, because now we are, with the countries participating, they are much more interested because they know that they will be in it. And I will say a few things how we mobilized about it, but I think this is one element that will support this sustainability of the intergovernmental work, that will help. And why it happened? Because the matters that we work on with the working group, they are very much those that matter to the countries. They bring these issues on the table. They decide about the topics. They decide what topic the policy brief has to be done on. They decide what topic for the policy seminar has to be. We started policy seminars recently that help to address some issues that were raised before, that help to get the possibility of this peer reviews, of the more in-depth looking into the issue, specific issues. So now with the standing working group on aging, we've got a bit broader mandate, not only longer, but also a bit broader, that we can engage in other, also to draw from other agendas like 2030 agenda or the decade on healthy aging now, that we will incorporate also in our work. And that's also thanks to Erika, who was one of the persons who was preparing the guidelines on national reporting, that we included several elements into it. So, as I say, what supports this sustainability, it is this possibility of exchanging experiences and being involved in the policy discussions at different levels. And the policy discussions and knowing your partner, knowing your neighbor, knowing the countries that are not there, and that this mode of the policy seminars or policy briefs with the practice examples is a helpful one. Now we also moved to preparing certain guidelines or policy recommendations. We worked on the roadmaps before the method. We still work on them when we are really working with one country in depth. And we involve some peers to help us. But now we move to the guidelines on mainstream engaging that are more general, that they might be helpful to all countries. And for that, again, it was initiative of the member state. It was a task force of 10 member states and NGO participation. Margaret Gillis, who was mentioned here, and I saw Galina Polakova, who is now online as well here. They were part of this task force and talking and deciding how to go about it. So monitoring and strengthening evidence base, again, it's also participatory approach. So these are kind of elements that I wanted to flag that support that sustainability of the intergovernmental work. Coming back to the policy seminars, which gives certain space for more interesting discussion and more involvement of the NGOs, of the civil society representation. And if you look at today's policy seminar that we will have next week on 18th of November, I will provide you a link at the program. You will see how many civil society representatives are there speaking on that, how many there are speakers, how many participate, and they are actually involved through their country national focal points. Who searched for them? Who helped us to find them? So it shows that also within the countries is a close cooperation with people who work on aging issues. Well, we had in 2019 policy seminar on informal care for persons with dementia. We had a half day dedicated to Switzerland, and we had on-site visits, and we had very in-depth discussion how these issues of the informal care are organized in Switzerland. That was a learning experience for all, for researchers, for NGO, and mainly for the country representatives. This was a very important element, I think. Now for our policy briefs on aging, This I put just the titles. These are titles decided by member states, decided by the working group, not only member states, but by the working group. And in the working group, we have NGOs, we have researchers there. And the latest policy brief just came online today, and we issued also the press release on all the persons in emergency situations. I really invite you all to look at it. Again, with a lot of practice examples from the member states, from civil society. So this, I'm trying to, once again, to support my argument that without involvement of all parties, government and civil society, we will not manage to support the sustainability. These things matter, these things have to be, and we are doing it as much as we can. Of course, there are some limitations in the protocol matters, but we often find the ways that these protocols are not as strict and not as rigid. You always can find ways. There are also issue-based coalitions. We don't have issue-based coalition on aging, but we work with the issue-based coalition on health and with others to work on these things. And not to abuse too much your time. Somehow got stuck here. Well, the guidelines will be forthcoming, and you will have a chance to look at those that are with the working group, but also we send in summer to wide group of experts and all working group members for the consultations for 2 months and receive the information and worked on it. This is also, as I said, at the request of the member states, and will be helpful, we hope, to all the member states. Now coming to the very final, let's say, slide and final element is how to mobilize the support for the working group for its program, because it's important participation. We have the new generation, as Erika said, of our national focal points. A lot of the long-standing ones now are retiring, taking or leaving. We have an influx of the younger group, and they're as dedicated as the older ones. Maybe they don't know the histories as well, but they're really very, very much dedicated. And with the COVID-19 now, they're even more. I think they gained a lot of experience now how to deal with these issues. So we have a dedicated group there. We have also the country donors that decided, what I heard from before, that there wasn't a support, financial support. We've got some support, not a huge support, but we've got some support from country donors to the working group, to the program elements. So we have some financial support, but also we have a good partners all around, international organizations. And one thing we have not, I wanted also to mention that in our region, in the UNECE region, we have also very strong sub-regional groups. We have European Union, as you know, with the strong intergovernmental processes as well. We have OECD, that also is the policy maker, and also certain monitoring, doing the pension reports and etc. So we have these groups that we have to learn how to work and to benefit from both. So on this, I would, sorry, it shouldn't go right away. I would like to thank you for your attention, and would like to draw your attention now to the policy seminar on aging that will take place on 18th November, dedicated to all the persons in emergency situations. And please do register and take part in it. You will hear quite interesting discussion, I hope. Thank you.
Vitalia, thank you very much. And I'll ask Andra to post those links to the webpage and the registration link in the chat box. So thank you for your commitment and the work that you do in support of older people, particularly across your regions of the world. It really is nice to see the commitment and the energy that you have for the field that you work in. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Christoph Angster from the Federal Ministry of Labour, Social Affairs, Health and Consumer Protection in Austria. It really is an honour to have you here, and I wish that we had governments from every network in the region on this call today, because it's really important to not only hear from government, but also for government to hear from speakers and presentations on particularly some of the frustrations we may be having around trying to improve the rights and quality for older people across this country. So Christoph, it is my pleasure to hand the floor to you, sir. And you're on mute, Christoph.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
I'm sorry for this technical problem, but like as you switched to the presentation to my screen, it appeared that my microphone disappeared. So I had to find the microphone to get it back. So Greg, thank you for the introduction. Before I start my presentation, I would like to take 1 or 2 minutes to also thank Erica for her like outstanding and exceptional work that she did the past couple of years, almost decades. I had the luck to work with her at the ministry. We were both at the same department. I worked very closely with her on aging policies and other areas as well. And she's always been a very great colleague, a great mentor. I told you, Erica, many times that you have an amazing library of knowledge, and I know if you retire, so if you're really not going to be physically at the ministry, this will be a very, very big hole that we try to fill, or that we have to try to fill. So I still hope, even if you're retired, if especially me, if I have questions, that you will be a contact person for me that I can reach to and get some guidance and get some help to solve the questions that are still upcoming. And I would like to talk about some of those questions that are still upcoming in my presentation. So my topic today will be synergies between the Standing Working Group on Aging and the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. And as it was said before, I am working for this, the federal government of Austria, for the Ministry of Social Affairs, Health Care and Consumer Protection. And I am the representative of Austria at the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, which was established in 2010 by the General Assembly, and which has the task to find out if the existing human rights legislation is sufficient, is also covering the needs of the enjoyment of human rights for older persons. So this has been a process for over 10 years right now, and yet there is no decision. So still up to date, we don't know if we need a convention or if we don't. Of course, there are many countries that say, of course, we do need a convention, but there are also countries that kind of say, no, actually, human rights cover everyone. They're universal, so the needs of older persons are by default covered by the existing legislation. So there are questions that need to be solved and answered. And I think, from my experience, I have been at the working group on aging for 3 times now. I started in 2017. And my experience, although it is limited, but it is some experience already, is that there is a need of more cooperation. There's a need of more synergies. And those synergies, especially with the Standing Working Group on Aging, is, in my opinion, information exchange. I understand that both groups in general, they want to improve the situation of older persons. And it has been my impression, especially when I talk to other colleagues, that, you know, the one group thinks, oh, the work at the Standing Working Group of Aging is more policy suggestions. It's not really the flesh in the soup. So we concentrate more on the work, on the legal framework that could be offered through a convention. So we focus more on the work on the open-ended working group of aging. And I think that's a mistake, because also at the open-ended working group on aging, we discuss issues, we discuss problems, of course, not in the same depth as it is done at the standing working group on aging, but it are basically the same topics, the same problems, the same needs. And I know as a fact, because I learned it from Erica in many discussions, a lot of questions that are discussed at the open-ended working group on aging had already been discussed on the standing working group on aging, and the transfer of knowledge is kind of missing. So I think the information exchange would be a very, very important factor. And how could that be done? Can I switch to next slide? Yes. So I think one very important synergy would be the physical presence at the annual conferences at the Standing Working Group on Aging and the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging. I know that, some focal points are representing both entities, Standing Working Group and Open-Ended Working Group. So you meet the same people at the same or at the different conferences, but still a lot of people are not aware of what the other group is actually discussing or doing. And I think it would be really a great improvement for both groups if there would be some sort of representation. And this could be done, for example, in side events. So I would strongly recommend as well for the next open-ended working group on aging, which will be in the end of March, beginning of April, that there would be a side event that would be hosted by the Office of the Standing Working, the Bureau of the Standing Working Group on Aging, and present the issues, the topics, the policy briefs, the developments, the thriving questions that are at the group. That there would be a forum at the open-ended working group where the actors could be invited and talk about what's going on in this other working group. I think that would create a lot of questions, answers, new synergies, and bring more movement and more momentum to the question, how can we improve the situation of all the persons globally? Another point that I've not here on my slide, but another point that I would like to raise, as I think it wasn't mentioned earlier before today, but the UNECE is only covering a very specific region, right? The open-ended working group is operating on a global level. So we have all regions at the open-ended working group. So I would also recommend to kind of look, what are the other regions doing? What I want to go towards a very specific topic here, because the Latin American chapter and the African chapter, they have conventions already installed. UNECE does not yet have such a document. And for the work of the open-ended working group, where we try to determine if we do need a convention, those documents that are already installed in those two regions, they are very important documents. And if you look at also the General Assembly, the third committee, they also said they want to have a closer look on those conventions. They want to see what is in there, how is it implemented in the countries, what are the effects, is it a positive, or is it more an obstacle to improve the situation of all the persons due to, for example, financial problems? So like me personally, I would like to see or hear what is the standing of such a document. I don't want to call it convention. I want to call it a document coming from the UNECE region that would aim towards something like those convention of the other regions. Yeah, as I said before, the 75th session of the third committee, they also addressed this issue at their last report. And what they also said, and I think this is a very important synergy as it touches both groups, the Standing Working Group on Aging, as well as the Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, is the reaffirmation of MIPAA also in the context with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also the address of possible gaps like age discrimination, neglect, abuse and violence, social isolation and loneliness, access to food and housing, access to healthcare services, access to employment, and access to legal capacities and justice. Those are issues that are also discussed in both working groups, but yet, information exchange could answer the same questions way more efficiently as if both working groups would answer them separately. Yeah, I said that before, like it was also recognized at the third committee that there should be a closer coordination between all UN entities and trying to avoid unnecessary duplications. And finally, another point that I would like to raise is what was said before, the national focal points. It is true, there is a new generation of focal points arising at the UNECE level, but also on the open-ended working group on aging's level. So it would be a very, very good synergy if those focal points could also be more connected, if there would be a network of these focal points in order to provide information exchange, meetings, and a common understanding of where both working groups are going. Because as I understand it, the open-ended working group, we're looking at the basic rights of people, human rights. The standing working group, from my understanding, is actually one level above. It is going towards policy recommendations, and that's far more going than the open-ended working group is going. So I think instead of seeing those two groups kind of working against each other, it should be more understood as one is providing a fundament, a base for the other group to build on that and go even further. And I really like what Frances said in her presentation, that one of the biggest issues is that older persons in general are not recognized. And I think the work of the open-ended working group, where it hopefully leads to a convention, this would give older persons the recognition that they need in order to have the power and the legitimization to demand more in-depth policies that actually have teeth. Because if they only stay recommendations, countries will always have a very easy way to say, oh, we simply don't have the budget, we don't have the money right now, we cannot go more into detail on these issues. And this is what we've seen in many other countries, that with a very easy swipe, grounded on money, the demands and the questions of older people, older persons, were simply neglected. So I would really want to address everyone here in this forum that we try to bring those two working cycles of the standing working group and the open-ended working group together, and try to find and work on those synergies where we have a common understanding, go forward and improve the situation for older persons globally. So to finish my presentation, I'd like to tell you a little bit more what are the current developments on the open-ended working group, as it was raised before as well. There are gaps. We know that they exist, but the problem right now in the discussion at the open-ended working group is, where are those gaps? Because we're only talking about gaps, and Austria and Germany last year launched a program or a study update with OHCHR to identify those normative gaps in the existing human rights legislation. And we're very looking forward to get the results of this updated study from 2012 to present at the next open-ended working group. And it would be great to have someone from the UNECE present at the next open-ended working group to sit with us in a side event that we want to organize to present this study, and just have a conversation with us, be in the room, be present, I really believe in cooperation, and I would want to reach out my hand to say, come on, let's work together and not try, we do our thing and you do your thing. We work together and we try to find a good way to help people all around the world. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. I will of course stay online if you have any questions, and I would want to hand back the word to Greg. Thank you.
All right, Christoph, thank you very much. It was fabulous presentation, and thank you for that. I do want to make a couple of very quick comments. So you did talk about the Universal Human Rights Declaration, which was ratified in 1948, and it was ratified by 48 of the 58 countries represented at the time. 8 abstained from that particular vote. But since that time, if we're talking about that convention does meet the rights of people, we wouldn't have a convention on people with disabilities. We wouldn't have one on children. We wouldn't have one on women. So clearly there's some great gaps and omissions in that Human Rights Declaration. And to the point of the Latin American and African regions coming up with a convention, there is 2 reasons. One, the open-ended working group is too slow and not doing enough, or 2, they want to make sure they get in something first, which is going to limit their obligations that a declaration coming through the UN might obligate them to. So thank you for that presentation. I really do look forward to our next presentation, who is going to round off the session today, and do please ask lots of questions at the end. I'd like to introduce Amal Abu Rafay, who is the really the Chief Program on Aging Officer at the United Nations Economic and Social Affairs. She serves on the Secretariat for the General Assembly Working Group for the purpose of strengthening protection and the rights of older people. She joined the UN in 2001 and worked in areas of social policy, sustainable development, and demography. And importantly, she also serves, if I remember correctly, on the World Economic Forum population aging component. So please join me in welcoming Amal to the floor. The floor is yours. Thanks, Amal.
Thank you so much, Craig. I'm especially happy to join today for 2 reasons. I'm honored and really humbled to be part of an outstanding lineup of panelists, some of whom are mentors of mine. And secondly, apparently my team have been counting. Today will be my 27th webinar since April. So one would think you guys are tired from listening to me. So it's a real treat to be invited and to join today. Thank you. I've been asked by the organizers to answer the question, any news from the UN regarding 20 years of MIPAA, and also to address what is the way forward. Let me start by answering the first question, as it is easier. The answer is no news. There is no news regarding the 20th anniversary of MIPAA. And this begs the question, why is that the case? Is it because member states no longer commemorate anniversaries? I don't think so. Last year, they agreed on the scope, modalities, format, and organization of a high-level meeting to mark the 20th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. Is it because, owing to the pandemic, this year's General Assembly's resolution on aging was subject to only a technical update? Well, the family resolution was also subject to a technical update, but delegations incorporated new language on observing the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family. So if my facial expressions allowed me to raise an eyebrow, I would have done that by now, because this begs the question of where is that political will that colleagues had talked about back during Vienna and Madrid? Still, should we be concerned? Definitely not. The Secretary General already flagged to member states in his report earlier this year that the 20th anniversary is approaching and that it provides an opportunity to generate renewed momentum for international action to advance the aging agenda. Also, the engagement of 2/3 of the membership of the United Nations in the most recent cycle of the review and appraisal of MIPAA attest to the continued importance of this document as the international policy framework on aging. There remains an opportunity, should member states be interested, to address the 20th anniversary in next year's General Assembly resolution on aging, and we'll keep a close eye on that. In the meantime, and addressing the way forward, the UN is stepping up its game when it comes to older persons and aging issues, as it should. I say as it should because if we were to think that this has happened recently in a smooth manner, we'd be mistaken. This took a lot and tremendous and persistent effort from colleagues throughout the UN system, throughout duty stations. And here I'd like to give a big thanks to the representatives from 19 UN agencies that represent the Interagency Group on Aging for the amazing work that they've pulled together over the past years and continue to do so. Remember, we're facing the greatest test of global solidarity in generations. Despite tremendous efforts to contain its spread, COVID continues to ravage the world. In the US, they're anticipating what they're referring to now in the news as COVID hell. And we know that this pandemic has been disproportionate and severely impacted older persons. DESA recently analyzed data from 55 countries, and only 55 countries, because we know that not all countries are reporting with the disaggregation by age in terms of their data. But in this analysis, they noted that the death rate of older people from COVID ranged from 4 to 40 times higher than that of younger ages. The deaths appear to be higher in countries where older people live in nursing homes. And in countries with high proportions of older persons living in institutions, there are over 60 times more likely to die from the pandemic than those at younger ages. Coming out of this crisis will require whole of society, whole of government approach. And this is precisely the vision and the ambition of MIPAA. The pandemic has also served to lay bare uncomfortable truths that older persons have long been subject to inadequate protection of their rights. But pandemics drive change. Realizing the need for immediate, impactful action, the Secretary General called for accelerating the efforts of the working group to develop proposals for an international legal instrument to promote and protect the rights and dignity of older persons. So let's see what will happen in the upcoming 11th session. And by the way, I believe that words hold and carry power. So from my end, and I don't know if you'd like to join me, I don't like to refer to it as the open-ended working group because we'd like it to reach a conclusion at some point. And also, I don't like referring to it as the working group on aging because it's actually, as per the resolution that established it, the working group for strengthening the promotion and protection of rights of older persons. So let's call it what it is. Preparing for an aging population is also integral to the achievement of the 2030 agenda, bearing in mind that by 2030, which is the target date for the Sustainable Development Goals, we know that the numbers of older people worldwide are going to outnumber youth. So what does that mean? It means that if we are to meet those targets, we must raise the visibility of and pay closer attention to the specific challenges faced by older persons. But I wish to take this a step further. DESA analyzed, I think, around 201 voluntary national reviews from 2016 through 2020. And around 2/3 of them include reference to aging. But when you take a closer look, we find that aging are often portrayed as a challenge, as a concern over the sustainability of social services, of pensions, of healthcare systems. We really need to pause and re-examine how we reference our changing population. I believe that emphasis on a negative view overlooks major opportunities that are also emerging. Older people are key actors of development and play crucial roles in their families, their communities, in economies, environments, and political systems. It's important not only to ensure that development gains reach them so that they're not left behind, but that their knowledge, their leadership, their experience and expertise are also harnessed to deliver on those goals. Let me be clear, this is not just a moral argument. That's what my colleagues in human rights do. For me, it's beyond that. The Secretary General's report to this session of the General Assembly presents new research on how longevity has the power to transform labor markets, economies, and societies. Reaping the benefits of longevity for development demands the adoption of evidence-based policies with a life course approach that incorporate the extension of longevity and re-examine existing structures, because plainly speaking, they are not aligned with demographics and with longevity. MIPAA continues to offer such an opportunity as it engages multiple actors at multiple levels, benefiting both current and future generations of older people. We know well that health in older age is not random. Much of that diversity is related to inequality or disadvantage that people carry with them into old age. People retain the right to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health as they age, and the decade of healthy aging provides an opportunity to shift focus from considering healthy aging as merely the absence of disease into fostering the functional ability that enables older people to be and to do what they value. The missions of Chile and Japan, decided to co-facilitate a resolution on the decade, which they will submit to the current session of the General Assembly. The decade builds on MIPAA and will draw on its review and appraisal mechanism. And that's just not my opinion, that's actually mentioned in the decade proposal itself. The way forward starts next year, as member states undertake their national reviews. Ensuring the creation of effective channels and mechanisms for participation and dialogue with older people themselves is key to give them a voice in decisions that directly affect them. With big thanks to Austria and your colleagues, Caroline Bartel, who facilitated negotiations in a really, really amazing and engaging way on the modalities resolution earlier this year, resulted in advancements and in changes of this, what would have been a regular technical resolution. Three key main elements is that it opened up the engagement from only organizations of older persons into civil society organizations at large. Secondly, it specified the invitation for NGOs to participate in the fourth review and appraisal, whereas before the language was vague and involved review process in general. And thirdly, there's language in this modality resolutions which NGOs can lean into that encourages member states to consider the provision of adequate assistance for participation of civil society in this review and appraisal exercise. These changes will be key to ensure a real bottom-up approach. I mean, otherwise, in my opinion, it's merely ink on paper, and that would be cheating the essence of MIPAA. As the Second World Assembly on Aging approaches its 20-year milestone, DESA is mobilizing its capacities and expertise to ensure that two of its upcoming flagship outputs, one is on population megatrends, and the other one is the World Social Report, to be zoomed in on aging. What's really interesting is that my team will not be involved in these two flagship outputs. Instead, colleagues from DESA that are demographers, experts in the fields of economics, public administration, social development, and technology, they will undertake this endeavor. This will offer a fresh perspective outside the box, which will be of great value to our work. WHO, in collaboration with DESA and OHCHR, will produce a global report on ageism early next year, which provides evidence on what works to prevent and respond to ageism. And as Christophe had mentioned, OHCHR is publishing a study that revisits the question of the adequacy of the normative framework of the international human rights system and its implementation mechanisms. So as you can see, we're all going to be quite busy in the coming months. In conclusion, the potential of older persons is a powerful basis for development. Now that sounds pretty cutting edge and quite contemporary, but believe it or not, I picked it up from MIPAA. There really is a moment, I believe, right now that we need to seize, and we really do not want to miss, to ensure the well-being, the social and economic inclusion, and the rights of older people everywhere. There is much to do, and I look forward to continue to engage with all our partners as we carry this burden together forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamal. I'm sure I can speak for all of us here today. We're honoured to have you at the UN and know that you are such a strong voice for all of us, representing the wants and the needs and the aspirations of older people across the world. So to you and your team, we all thank you very much. So thank you. There's been a number of questions that have come in through the chat function, and I will ask people to actually relay their question. I'll call on them, but there was one that came up particularly early that I will actually relay to Sasha, if you don't mind, and that was because you were involved in the development of MIPAA when it was adopted, and you would have seen what the political vibe was back when it was developed. What's your view on why we continue to see a lack of political will and commitment to older people today? And what was, is it different today as it was back when MIPAA was first developed?
Thank you, Greg. I think I would invite later Amal to join me in answering this question, because she's been going through the review and appraisal exercises of Madrid Plan of Action on Aging after I left the United Nations Program on Aging. Well, my immediate reflection on this would be that when we're talking about policy, we very often forget about politics. And it just happened so in the back to 2002, when the Second World Assembly on Aging was organizing, it was some sort of a remnant of euphoria after the major changes in the politics around the globe. Collapse of the Soviet Union, the great, I would say, enthusiasm about the possibilities of addressing the social illness of the society. I would refer, of course, to the International Congress on Social Development, which took place in Copenhagen in 1995 and actually produced this famous motto, Society for All. We just picked it up for the International Year of Older Persons and then moved it into the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. So it's policy on the basis of politics, and in reference to the current circumstances, I can hear on different fora still very soft voices that we need to look into the major documents of the United Nations and to see whether they are actually still be implemented in the way that they were supposed to be implemented. And the reference was often made to SDGs. So you should look carefully to the politics, and that's, I'm afraid, the only way to advance in the policy world as well. But I certainly would appreciate if Amal would say something much more specific than this general consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sasha. It's always interesting to listen and hear from someone which was around in day one of those types of things. Excuse me. We did have a question earlier from Vapu, and it was really targeted towards Dirk and to Francis. Vapu, are you online? Would you like to ask the question around technologies? Vapu, are you there?
Yeah, hello all.
Hello.
Hello, here I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm an old woman, and I also have been along so long time. So we organized in Madrid 2002 a great round table about independent living and new technologies. And I have been following up the development of geron technology and IT and so, but I would like to ask you, Sasha, Dirk, What do you think? What is the situation now? Are we old people now marginalized, or are we within the development? What can we do?
Thank you very much for that. Dirk?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to respond to two questions. The first one is from Vapu, the role of new technologies. I think they are absolutely essential in these times where everybody says, keep social distance. That is a terrible expression, because what we should not do is to keep social distance. We should keep physical distance, but social distance must be even more developed than ever. And there, the new media, the new technologies play an essential role in order to maintain the relationship between people, not only older people, but the young and the old, and the old and the old, etc., etc., etc. I think this is absolutely, absolutely key. It is a myth that too many older persons do not use or do not like these modern technologies. It has been proved that this is not the case. They are very interested, but they need a little bit of help. I know that, for example, I see Paul Anker here, that, for example, the Danish government has established a system where you can only correspond with the government structures by computers, by electronic means, and that is used widely, etc. And people are more and more fit to do that. Obviously, the young are even better because they grow up with that. But don't underestimate the capacities of older persons in using modern technologies.
Thank you for that.
I would like to respond to another short question from
Make it quick.
Mollenkopf. She said, what to suggest to make the ideas which I put forward really real. And I would like to say, we need more allies, more advocates from the governmental area. We need more Erikas, we need more Alesh Kendalls, etc. All these people who support us and who voice our concerns in the public and governmental decision-making bodies. It's not only us who say, yes, we are here, etc., but they understand the importance of civil society, and they courageously defend the point of view that there must be an integral part of the whole game and decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. And I know we're getting close to the end of our 2-hour time slot, but I just wanted to go back to the issue of what the political will was when we developed MIPAA and where it is today. And I think I should have asked Amal to make some comments after Sasha had made some comments. So Amal, any comments that you have to what Sasha had responded to?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. And I just to also answer Vapu, yeah, older people continue to be overlooked. Of course, politics is the key word here, but I also think the issue of growing old resonates, you know, at a personal level with people. It reminds us of our own mortality. If you listen to all the senior officials at the UN when they hold meetings on aging, everyone mentions their mother. So at a personal level, they deal with it. But when it comes to a society global level, you know, older people are just not part of that drop-down list of, you know, high risk or groups that require specific attention. I think it's also a hard sell. And lately we've been using the approach of not to talk at member states, but to talk to them. And that's why the recent report we had prepared for the Secretary General goes into quantifying the the participation value of older people in society. But then again, Craig, why do I need to slap a dollar bill on an older person to make them have value to politicians? I mean, what kind of communities are we? What are our values? That's a question to be raised. And also, just one quick last point, there is no policy sense to what's happening. when it comes to older people. Why? Because these governments invested in their citizens at younger ages, through childhood, through youth, through the working age. You know what that resulted in? People living longer. And now that they do live longer, they look at them and say, ugh, you know, this is a burden. So in that case, then why don't you close the tap from the source, stop investing in kids, stop investing in health, stop investing in education, you know, to be in line with your policy thinking. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and we count on, my experiences, it takes so many people from very different stakeholders approaching the same issue to get results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amal. And I know we are running out of time, and I know that the presentation is being made available and recorded, and it's going to be, Amal has asked that it be available for her and through your website, Amal, which is fantastic. I think we'll look at how the NGO committee can make it available as well. The chat function, the questions, the resources that people have added are really certainly valuable, and I thank you. I do want to hand the floor back to Jackie just to say her final thanks and wrap up, and then we will say farewell to you all, but thank you to you all.
Yeah, I just posted a message thanking everybody, thanking Andre, thanking you, Greg, thanking Jane Barrett, thanking all the speakers, and thanking all the participants for their input. And the speakers mainly, they presented us with a lot of ideas how to move forward, but I think mainly now, but now I think it's important that, as even Amal said, that we really try and think, and Dirk has always put it forward, and Francis, that we try and think of really the positive aspects and try to push them more in society, what older persons provide for our society, grandmas taking care of children, all of these aspects. I don't want to go down a whole list of them. And I think we should also push, that's my push, for lifelong learning, that older persons can stay cognitively active for longer periods of time and enjoy life more. And yeah, I don't know what else to say, but to thank you all for being part of this. It was a stimulating afternoon for me, very much so. And I'm looking forward to studying the PowerPoint so that, and Francis' statement also, that we have time to digest it more sincerely. And Erica, we love you. Take care.
Well said. So with that, Jackie, I want to say thank you to you. And
I'm very happy to have you here, and I wish you all the best for the successes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica, and God bless to you, and thank you to everyone, and we will see you at our next meeting, whenever that may be. So thank you. Bye-bye. And thank you to the speakers.